Good morning, everyone. We're just giving everyone a few minutes to get in here, and then we'll get started. All right, it is 12:02, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I am so very pleased to get to introduce Mr. Seth Palmer, Director of Regulatory Affairs and External Communications for the North Carolina Association of Realtors. He represents the NC Realtors before state regulatory bodies and manages the association's advocacy and external communications activities. On a personal note, I still owe Seth a debt of gratitude for your immense help with the successful Raleigh transportation referendum that we helped write, as well as the grant proposal to go with it. Prior to joining the North Carolina Realtors in 2014, Seth served in multiple roles in the North Carolina government, including on the staffs of the House Majority Leader, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Seth regularly presents and trains members on topics of advocacy, lobbying, and communications. He has been a presenter at numerous NAR conferences and currently serves as a faculty member at the NC Institute of Political Leadership. Seth lives in Raleigh with his wife, Liz, and their daughter, Becca. And my understanding is Miss Becca has her own hashtag already, Becca Onista. Is that right, Seth?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very much looking forward to the information you're going to share with us.
Thank you so much, Tessa, and thank you for the opportunity to present on a topic that I really love and see a lot of value in. I've seen some of the comments in the chat box that the skills of effective and successful communication are essential, not just normally, but especially now as we're dealing with some very unique circumstances in our world and where Zoom and other technology means are our primary form of communication. So as a caveat coming into this, I'll give you a little bit of a disclaimer that I am from the South. I use the word y'all, not dissimilar to your own VP of Government Affairs, Bo Patton, who is a great friend and fellow member of the GAD Advisory Group. So I apologize in advance if I drop y'all and some other Southern colloquialisms a little too often. I try to make the change, but it's a little bit hard. So we're going to talk about not necessarily being a spokesperson in this traditional sense, but why that's important to think about in communications overall. So our agenda today, give you a little bit of a welcome, a little bit of an overview of who I am, in addition to what Tessa ran through in my bio. Then we're going to talk about the 5 keys to effective communication. These are my keys. They're not necessarily the keys that another trainer would provide you, but these are things that through my work with realtors, with other types of professionals, that I've learned are extremely beneficial in how we put together communications in any form or fashion. And I've worked with folks, as we'll talk about, who range from extremely adept speakers to extremely novice speakers. And I myself am still evolving as a speaker today. I do this because I enjoy it, but also because I know that it's something that I need to do to learn and grow in both my profession and my personal life. And that's something I hope that you take away from this conversation today. We'll talk a little bit about some resources because, like anything, we're not alone, even when we're 6 feet apart. And then finally, I'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns. Feel free to think about them, write them down. I cannot monitor the chat while we're going through, but I know Tessa and Marianne are watching in the back end, and if there's things that get raised in there, I'm certainly glad to cover those as well. So as Tessa mentioned, I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs and External Communications. That's a really long way of saying that I'm a lobbyist and a communications director for the North Carolina Association of Realtors. There are 48,000 plus members of the association who represent all 100 counties. So we in the state talk about the mountains to the coast, much like y'all have in New York. We have that exactly in North Carolina, and they range from extremely rural communities to very urban communities like Raleigh and Charlotte. So dealing with the disparate changes and things that go on in those marketplaces really affect how we communicate and engage. And I'm more broadly a lobbyist and public affairs professional with almost 12 years of experience in this field. It's been an interesting 12 years starting out right after the significant part of the economic recession and getting into government work, and now being in it through a pandemic. It's certainly something to keep in mind as I go forward in my life. And I have, in my time, prepped senior elected officials and business leaders for high stakes media and speaking engagements. And there's me before I grew a beard during the pandemic. So in short, I am a spokesperson. I am tasked in my day-to-day work with communicating to the membership, communicating to the external audiences like the media about what's going on in the life of the association and what is kind of the status of the market. That's a role that I enjoy, I love, but it's also not just all that I do. I also love to go out and teach. My dad is a 30+ year retired high school science teacher. Growing up said that I never wanted to be a teacher, but that was until I actually started doing it and was able to get out and to engage with folks and really see the value in talking and teaching, because of the importance that having skills that you can use is to your business, to your industry, and ultimately to yourselves. And then finally, as my wife will tell you, as any of my family will tell you, I was essentially born to talk. My grandmother made the joke that I was pricked with a Victrola needle when I was very little, and I just continued to talk. And so I guess because of that, I had to learn how to talk effectively so as not to get drowned out in any kind of conversation. So when you probably saw this effective communications presentation, you probably thought about spokesperson. And you've heard that a lot in both leadership development classes, maybe in your undergraduate work or in other parts of your business, that people get trained to be a spokesperson. And unfortunately, what that evokes in most people's mind is somebody like this. Your CJ Craig's, your Seth Godin's, your even maybe Melissa McCarthy playing Sean Spicer on SNL. You think of somebody standing behind a podium and standing there representing a person and representing somebody, and not just these fake people of popular culture, but also these real people, Robert Gibbs, James Brady, Kayleigh McEnany, who are spokespeople. That's what they do. They're called press secretaries or communications directors, and that evokes a particular feeling, not partisan necessarily, but role. They're a mouthpiece. They're just reading off talking points. They're somebody who is there only to communicate what their boss is trying to present. But spokesperson, more than anything, is about effective engagement. You can't be a spokesperson if you're just out there, if you have no concept of what you're talking about, if you have no wherewithal, no experience, no role or responsibility to talk about it. But you also can't be an effective spokesperson if you don't think about how to effectively communicate. Some of the best spokespeople can, with great fluidity and functionality, be able to pivot from one thing to the other without it seeming seeming effortless, not without seeming like it's that much of a painful process. And in your business, as a realtor, as a business person, and as a community leader, you have to be effective in how you communicate in order to convey the message you want to your clients, to your fellow realtors, and even to the broader populace, because a lot of times realtors are looked on as experts in the marketplace, because guess what? You are. So we have to really stop and think about what is effective communication, and not in that context of spokesperson standing behind a podium, because for the most part, very, very few people will ever do that. It's not a job that is ubiquitous out in the marketplace, that if you came out from school, even with a communications degree, and you said, I want to be a press secretary, there's not a whole lot of opportunities in that marketplace. There are a select few people who get that chance, but everybody in the business world, in the private sector, in the public sector have to be effective in their communication. So that's where I love to stop this thought process that spokesperson training is only about learning how to talk to the media or to stand behind a podium and read some talking points. That may be part of what you do if you assume a leadership role in your association or in another entity. But for the most part, you still have to talk to people. You still have to engage. You still have to convey a message that makes a lot of sense, because if not, you're not going to last very long in your business, and it's not going to be a very fun opportunity to continue doing what I hope each and every one of you love, because that's why you are a realtor. That's why you want to continue to grow your profession. So in order to think about communications, I've broken it down into 5 keys to effective communication. Like I said from the beginning, these are my keys. They're not necessarily unique in any respect, but they build on a framework that helps you understand who you are, why you do what you do, what benefits that provides you in communications, and then how to operationalize that and be effective. And yes, at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about social media, because social media, not just in the days of the pandemic, is the medium of communications of 2020 and will likely be the medium going forward. And that comes with its own separate and unique challenges and opportunities. One of the things that I didn't cover in this presentation, and there are whole presentations that can and do, is effective communication through virtual means. I try to cover that a little bit, and we'll talk through some examples, but how we communicate now through Zoom, which I would hope for all of our sakes that we aren't having to do for the indeterminate future, but likely for at least the near-term future, is how you present in a virtual context where you can't see everybody that you're speaking to, and you can't have the engagement in the same way that you do in person. There are some differences, there are some specialties there, and maybe we can touch on them, and if you have questions about that specifically, we can answer those in the Q&A, and then maybe I'll find another opportunity and work on something more specific like that. It's not something that any of us in communications really had spent a lot of time thinking about, because I don't think any of us really thought we would be doing this 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day. All right. So first and foremost, in effective communication, you have to know who you are. As realtors, that's who we are, that's who you are, but understanding what your role is in the conversation, because we each play a role. In a transaction, you're either on the buyer's side or the seller's side. You're on the property management side and you represent the landlord, or you're in commercial brokerage and you're representing a piece of land, or you're representing a commercial building. And while those may not seem mutually exclusive to one another, it's important to understand the role that you play, because with that brings its own set of opportunities. So who are you? First and foremost, you are a realtor. You are a member of the National Association of Realtors. You're a member of the New York State Association of Realtors, and you're a member of the Long Island Board of Realtors. That's who you are. That is your identity first and foremost. You wouldn't be on this call if you were not a realtor. And because of that, and because what each and every one of you know, it comes with a special brand, but also a special responsibility, because you exceed the requirements of just a normal rank and file licensee. In North Carolina, there are 48,000 realtor members, but there are over 90,000 real estate licensees. These are folks who have a license and are able to conduct a legal real estate transaction under the law and the rules of the state. They may not live in North Carolina, or they may live in North Carolina and they choose not to be a member of the association. And so that gives us a distinguishing factor, that there is an association who represents the individuals who are members of it, who supports them, stands them up, gives them opportunities for education and leadership development, and also gives them a code of ethics and a brand that is unique to any other profession. Without that, you're just a licensee. You're the same as anybody else. And so having that automatically elevates your perspective, because if you're given opportunities to speak in public, or when you engage with your clients, knowing and understanding what a realtor is and what makes you special gives you a leg up. And that's why it's important to utilize that branding and that feeling to say, I'm a realtor, and I matter, and that's why I'm here, and why I'm engaging with you in whatever transaction or opportunity you have. You're also experienced professionals. Being in the marketplace, you know it better than anybody else. Nobody else in any market knows the inflows and outflows, the inventory, the changes, the challenges, like a realtor, because that's what you're employed and what you benefit on, is that knowledge. You have to know what your marketplace looks like in order to effectively and legally represent your clients. You're not going to walk into a client meeting and if they ask you what the comps in that area are, you aren't going to just say, I don't know, because guess what? You're probably not going to be representing them for very long. And so having that knowledge, having that understanding, that willingness, that drive gives you an additional leg up. And not just from being a realtor, you have one leg up. Now you're standing 2 feet taller. You're business people. You go out every day and you hustle. That is the easiest and most frank way that I can put it as an association staffer. I talk to my members on a daily basis. I hear from them all the time, anytime, and they're out there hustling. I know that the pandemic has brought on unique challenges to each and every one of the realtor members across the country, and not exclusively to any one area as far as the challenges being faced to the business, to the industry. I know that the challenges y'all are facing in New York with your stay-at-home orders and other essential business designations have been difficult, and they have been in North Carolina, they have been in Tennessee and Texas and in Colorado, and in any place, because that's the world that we're living in right now. But as business people, you know that your success is derived from your hard work, your hustle, your engagement, and so that gives you that additional perspective to bring to the conversation. So why is it important to make these? I've covered a couple of them, and I talk about the hustle and the drive. But when you're out there talking to a group or to an individual, so let's use a client conversation, for example. So you're going in to meet a seller of a property, and you're able to walk in and say, hi, I'm John Doe. I'm a realtor with XYZ team, and I'm here. I've been in this industry and in this marketplace for over 25 years. And I go in and day out, I sell myself as an experienced professional, and I sell my clients' properties to the highest and the best ability that I have. I go out there day in and day out and do this work for you. That's a lot more effective than walking in there and saying, hey, I'm Seth Palmer. I sell real estate. I've been around for a little while. It sounds it's sort of my job, but I got a couple other side hustles on the side. I'm out there driving Uber and DoorDash and whatever. That doesn't breed a lot of confidence. So having these identifiers, these connections back, helps you when you go and present, and keeping them in your mind and knowing them, because it really is who exactly you are. It's not these esoteric highfalutin feelings. It's what you do. It's what you know. You wear the realtor pin with pride, and you're out there doing the work. So take the credit for it and use it as a tool in your communications arsenal. Next, so you've gone through who you are and what your role, but what else do you have to support you? You have these names, you have these titles, these recognitions, these pieces of, I don't think of it necessarily in the office space mindset of the pieces of flair, but I know realtors like flair. I've got my RPAC pen here, name tags, all those kind of things. But what else is there to support you? You have your association there, but what else is really in the back end helping you be effective in your communication? So we talked a lot about that licensee versus realtor designation and that business person designation. But the biggest on here is that independent contractor. You as an independent contractor, as a licensed real estate practitioner who, yes, you have a branding attached to you. You may work for Caldwell Banker or for State Farm or for any of the pantheon of real estate firms, but at the end of the day, your name is attached to it and your experience is attached to it. Yeah, having a firm who's been around for 50, 75, 100 years is awesome. That's a great selling feature. But if you, the real estate licensee, the realtor of that firm, don't have any experience, that doesn't mean a whole hill of anything to anybody, because they're just assuming that you come with some gravitas yourself because of the company. But then when you get into the practice of doing what you have to do, it doesn't really move the needle much. So being able to communicate that experience, and going back to the example I just covered of I've been in this business for 25 years and I live in this community and I work in this community and my family lives and works in this community, that carries with it a lot. And I know, especially in competitive marketplaces as realtors, having a distinguishing factor and being able to make that distinguishment is so important for business. But also when you get out into your community and you may speak before a city council or town council because they have an issue that is so important to your life that you want to stand up and say something either positive or negative about it. Those are opportunities you should take advantage of, because you are an independent contractor, you are a business person, you are a realtor, you are a citizen of that area. Work with your government affairs team that is definitely top flight to go and to use those tools that you have that just come with you. I can tell you very clearly, and having trained a lot of people on how to speak before government bodies, it is scary. But if you walk into that room knowing what your experience is, what your goal, what your role is, it makes it a whole lot less stressful. And leverage that perspective that you have. You represent, as a realtor, as a real estate professional, an industry that has more than 1.4 million people across this country doing it. They do the exact same thing you do every day. They get up every morning and they work to represent the best interest of their clients. You also represent a business that drives the economy. I've been doing a lot of research for some communications we're working on here in North Carolina, and a potential news story with an outlet that looks at real estate being a driving force, getting our country and states out of previous recessions. There's a lot of research that shows that housing is a key indicator that brings the economy back up in times where it has gone down. Even in the 2008 recession, which was brought on by a housing related challenge, there were times and towards the latter part of it where, because the housing market and because the impact that the housing industry has on so many different professions and so many different inputs that go into a total real estate transaction, from the building of a house all the way to the sale and final closing and moving in and getting a home ready to live in, all that impact has a potential for a significant positive boost. Use those kind of tools, use those kind of communication activities and opportunities, and use the leverage of the leadership that your association, your industry plays. In North Carolina, we will celebrate our 100th year of existence as a state association of realtors. I apologize, I'm not exactly sure how many years LIBOR has been around and other associations, but we've all been around for a number of years. We're not some fly-by-night organization that just popped up 2 weeks ago for a limited purpose and is going to disappear as soon as that purpose is there. We're here, we're in communities, we work in those communities, and we're going to be here in the future. And that leadership, whether implied or expounded upon, excuse me, is so important when you communicate, because that brings with it its own balance, that its own boost, because you don't want to go out there and just be made to feel like, oh, you're here for 2 weeks and you'll be gone next week. No, doesn't help. May move a needle a little bit, but not necessarily too far. Okay, so we have talked about what your role is, what you already have to support you, but now we got to think about what we're doing when we actually communicate. We have all these things coming with us. We got our tools, but now we've got to build that doghouse, or that deck, or paint that picture. So let's think about ways to not make things harder because we're not being clear. Anytime you communicate, or you listen to somebody communicating, if they walk into a room and they come out and they talk like this, and they try to move really, really fast through a presentation and have a really quick cadence of tone, you're not going to understand them. Same way if somebody comes in and they're not really enthusiastic and they're just kind of walking through it. That may be fun for 2 minutes while you try to pick up on the next word they're going to say in their 15 words per hour conversation, but it's not really that clear. You may probably leave that conversation, that presentation, and you may still have no clue what the heck they were talking about. So when you talk, remember these 4 points, and I will make this presentation available for distribution, because I know I'm covering numbers, and as a lobbyist, that's not always something that I try to do, but when we break things down in communications, numbers really do work. Number 1 is a focused message. If you have a beginning, a middle, and an end in any kind of communication, you will be successful. Second, it is a clear speech pattern. If you have, like I do, a slight Southern drawl, or you have a more fast-pitched and fast-paced tone of voice, and that works for you, find that rhythm, find that balance, but also understand the audience that you're communicating with. If you're communicating with one person, you don't have to talk at a 200 decibel level. You don't have to be out there yelling all the time. Same way, if you're talking to a group of 100 people in a room, you don't need to speak very softly. You don't need, you may have a microphone, but the microphone can only do so much to pick up the tone of what you're trying to say. And also, if you're moving in kind of an erratic fashion, that actually makes it even harder to listen and understand somebody, because you're not able to follow that pitch, that cadence, that dialect, because the tone and the pattern is changing. Our brains really aren't that capable to pick up on that quick and fast pattern change. And there's a lot of courses that can walk you through tone, pattern, and cadence. They're a lot more expansive than we could cover in this presentation. And I can talk about those a little bit in the resources. Third, and probably second most important on this list after focus, is own what you know and what you don't. And that truly, we'll talk about that in 1 second, but that means honesty, integrity, and clarity. Don't lie to anybody, because you may be able to move your way through it in the interim, but it's not going to last. And that trust factor not only diminishes as you break it, but it also hurts your effectiveness in communication, because you can get lost in lies. You can get lost in embellishments and not know where you're going. And then it becomes extremely apparent that you're embellishing. And then finally, of the 4 points, keep calm and carry on. So in focused message, there is an importance in preparation. Anytime that you're walking into an opportunity to communicate, whether it's with a buyer, with another broker, as a member of association leadership, as a member of your community, preparation is key. It is important to do some kind of prep, whether it's reading talking points or just a news article about something, or It's going through and just thinking about what you're going to say going into to a conversation. We all know going into a transaction that you know where your client stands. If you're going in as the buyer's agent and the seller says, all right, what's your offer? And you say 400,000 and they counter you and say, no, 450. You know where your client's breaking point is. You know where the line is, and you have that preparation going in. You're not waffling back and forth. You may have to have some negotiations, but you're not unconfident or timid in what you're going to do. And it's also in focus message. It's not overcomplicating things. When we talk just normally to anybody, we're not trying to overcomplicate things. We may, but we're not necessarily trying to. And so when you're communicating, when you're out there having conversations with folks, don't do it there. Make it feel like a conversation. Make it feel like an engagement that you want to be in, and it becomes a lot more focused. If you go and you don't really know why you're talking to somebody, and you don't know what your purpose is, you don't know what your role and your expertise is, you go off on tangents. You can be out talking one day about excuse me, about the real estate market. You can go off talking about baseball, or you can talk about football and why the NFL may or may not come back and why the Jets may or may not win this year. And you can go off and talk about your kids and your beach trip and your grandparents. And I mean, we could be here all day coming up with ways to take this off on tangents. And also, you don't look at it in that linear fashion that keeps people engaged. And that's why, as we're going to hit right here, that clear pattern, that clear cadence. Is not always a bad thing if you use it correctly. If you go up there and you say, but I'm thinking about this, and I just don't know, and you're just really you're making the gestures, the feelings, the conversation about it becomes more about the than it does about what you're actually going to say. But if you're thinking and you intentionally use the as you think, and it's a quick, yeah, that sounds good, and it's that little bit of a break, it doesn't seem that complicated. As we'll talk about towards the end, the calmness factor is extremely important. Breathing is definitely important. I have seen more than enough people stand up in front of even small groups and not take breath into mind and end up almost passing out a couple of times. Don't do that. It's not helpful to you just in general, but it's also not an effective tool, because you don't want to be branded the person who doesn't take into the mind that breath and is either standing up there going or this or that or this, because that's confusing. That's concerning. Also, you probably will become the person who the ambulance is on standby for. But also, it's not effective because it's not controllable and it's not understandable. And so when we move into our next piece, it doesn't make you understand and own what you know and what you don't. That preparation is I hit on 2 or 3 pieces here, and I hit on in a couple ways in the previous session. Preparation is not going in and reading books and articles and having a whole talking point binder set in front of you before you stand up and you talk to somebody, because you're not always afforded that opportunity, because you may be talking to them at a coffee shop or over a Zoom meeting or on the phone, and you can't be rustling papers in the background and trying to say, hold on, let me look and let me read and let me make sure. That doesn't help you at all. But that preparation of knowing what you know going into something, knowing that your experience, your role, your value to the conversation came with you before you even came to it. You had all these things in your toolbox already. And so being able to walk in and to cover everything you need to cover is already prepared for you. So don't think about preparation in the sense of studying, but more in the preparation of lived experience. You may have times where preparation is studying and reading and understanding and utilizing tools that are put forth by your association, by other groups, taking designation classes, taking other CE or educational opportunities that are out there to grow your depth of knowledge is a huge form of preparation and a huge part of building what you know. Staying on point is also a key part, because if you know what you know, and you know that when you walked into the house that it was 2,450 square feet, you know that solidly. If somebody comes in and says, feels about 25, about 26, okay, you're not going to take that at face value. You're going to say, no, the house has been measured and it is 2,450 square feet. You know it, you own it, and you stick with it. Staying in those lanes that you're comfortable in, and also what you know, is so important, because as you bridge away from those, you may go down pathways that you don't know what you're talking about. And that's a hard place to come back from, because you get down a pathway, you go down the rabbit hole, and you're out there talking, and you're making conjecture, you're making assumptions based on what you may have heard or what you may feel, and somebody might take that as face value. They may take that back, and if you say, when you go in for a final walkthrough, and you look up and there had been some marks on the ceiling, and the buyer's agent, like, were those taken care of? If you don't know that they were taken care of, you can get into disclosure violations. You cannot be fully representing and doing the duty that you're paid to do and what you're legally required to do on behalf of your client if you don't know what you don't know. If the bubbling in the backyard is not an underground oil well, and the Beverly Hillbillies aren't coming to capitalize on it, don't assume that it's oil. Assume that it might be something bad, and get the proper professionals out to look at it. Don't just make it up or to go off when you really just don't know. And always, if you're asked questions, even if you don't know, answer to the best of your ability. I don't know is absolutely a valid, important, necessary answer. If you do not know, you do not know. Making it up is not very easy to come back from, and is extremely hard to sustain. I can certainly, in some of my longer trainings, I show some videos of people who've done that, and you can watch, especially in TV or some other visual medium, you can watch when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, or when they answer and it is complete and utter fallacy and just junk. Unless they are a professional liar, they cannot keep it up. They cannot keep their facial tics, their eye movements, their mouth movements, their kind of shifting or any of that. They can't keep those comfortable for very long, as they get deeper and deeper and deeper into lies, or to even just misstatements of the truth. It's a really, really hard thing to watch, and it's a really, really hard thing to move forward with. And then, as we talk about, and I will always come back to, speaking in any form or fashion is not anything to be afraid of. It may give you the butterflies, it may give you a little bit of just kind of uneasy feeling, it may make you sweat, it may make you uncomfortable, but you'll get through it. And especially as you talk to groups of people like you, if you have the opportunity to stand up in front of your association, they're there cheering you on. They want you to succeed, because it makes them understand and makes them confident enough that they can succeed, because there's always going to be somebody in that room who is more uncomfortable, if not a little bit, but maybe even a lot more uncomfortable doing it than you are. And if you can go up there and do it, and you can be comfortable in how you talk and how you present, it makes them comfortable. It makes your fellow agents comfortable when you're able to sit across the closing table, hopefully sooner rather than later, and have those conversations and be able to be collegial and have a conversation. They're much more willing to work with you in the future because you're decently calm and nice person. If you're erratic and angry and always up in arms about something, it's not going to work. It's just not going to make you very successful, and it will ultimately cause you a lot more personal and potentially professional struggles than if you had just taken a breath, stood back, and thought about it. Speaking slowly and confidently. This is a tool and a trick that I've learned over time to keep the calmness, even if I'm standing up in front of a room of 200-300 people. It's to come up to the podium or to come up to the area, stand there for a second, take a breath, collect myself, put my keys on the table, take away the distractions, speak slowly, and speak confidently. Because I've known what I know, I've owned what I don't, I know the role and the experience that I play, and that's why I'm here. And this isn't unique to being a spokesperson or a person standing in front of a room full of people. If you do it in your daily life, it translates to everything else. And then finally, know that there are always resources here to help you. Even 6 feet apart, you are not alone. There are thousands of members of the association out there who do the same thing you do, who are dealing with the same challenges that you are. There are million four at this current juncture of realtors across the country who do what you do and know the challenges that you face. While they may not have specifically dealt with that unique challenge that is only specific to your market in Long Island, they've still had challenging clients. They've still had complicated deals. They've still had government entities telling them what they can and can't do. And they've still had the challenges of association life and leadership and engagement. That's why groups of like-minded professionals, like trade associations, are so valuable, because they bring together groups of like-minded people. As your resources, you have an awesome staff team. I've been so fortunate to work with Tessa in her role while she was with the Raleigh Regional Association. I've had the pleasure of working with Bo, your government affairs director, and I've now had the great opportunity to communicate with Amy and Marianne from communications and from your events team. You have an awesome staff. There are awesome staffs at realtor associations across this country and at the national level. We, as staff members, are here to help you. If you have an opportunity to go speak to your Rotary Club or to your church and you want to ask questions, ask questions. We have all, and even if we're not in communications, we've all communicated in some form or fashion in our life. We've all been able to go and to do these things and may have learned some tricks or some tools or some opportunities that make it a little bit easier. You also can look to your fellow realtors. That is, like I said, the beauty of a like-minded trade association. Somebody's probably done this before. If you want to be in leadership, there have been people who have come before you, and they can give you advice and give you some tools and some tricks that make it a little bit easier. Use them. I know that each and every one of them would be just as happy to talk to you as I am. My contact information is out there. It may not be on the very last slide, but I'll make sure it's available. Call me, email me. I'll be glad. It's not unique to just working with my members in North Carolina, but it's just working with anybody who wants to be effective in whatever they do. And I'm always glad to connect with somebody and have a conversation about how to, in this case, be more effective in communications, because it's something that I love. There are also a ton of education programs. I know y'all have a great leadership academy and leadership program that teaches many tools and tricks in communications, specifically tied to realtor leadership. But there are also groups out there like Toastmasters and other educational programs that help in just everyday communication, everyday engagement. Toastmasters uses a great platform to make you think about how you talk. Yeah, it'll teach you how to give a a 5, a 10, a 15-minute speech in front of a room full of people. But those tools, those tricks that they teach there can and do translate into real world situations that aren't 50 to 100 person rooms. They're 5, 1, 2, talking to your kid. Unless it's your 2-year-old like mine who just kind of ignores you from time to time. But those educational opportunities are out there. They're great, and there's a lot of them that you can do online now, not just during COVID-19, but also before. So use those, and I can certainly talk about those specifically if you have any questions. And finally, as we go through and we close out the 5 keys to effective communication, the final, but probably should be the first, protect your brand. Who is your brand? You are your brand. When I go and I talk to other organizations, or I teach in the political arena through the Institute of Political Leadership, or I work on any kind of organization in how we engage, I give the example that realtors are one of the only professions who openly puts their face on their cards, on their signs, on their advertisements, because that's who they are, and they stand behind the decisions and the actions that they are making. And so with that comes the responsibility to protect your brand. And you do that through licensing, education, code of ethics, but also through how you communicate. And that's why it brings me to social media. Social media is an awesome tool. The opportunities that are presented through utilizing platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitch, you name it, I probably will forget 1 or 2 more somewhere down the line. But those are great ways to connect with people. We're all on them, sometimes more than we should be, sometimes to the point where the little phone usage thing on Apple says that I've been on it for 45 to 50 minutes a day. That's a little concerning. Chances are it was for work. At least that's what I tell myself and tell my wife. But when you're on social media, while learning and reading all the content that's out there, you have to be really careful with the image that you portray on social media. You may be on there just to read, just to like pictures of your grandkids, your kids, or to monitor your kids if they're teenage like me and my friends' children are, or you're just on there to get some recipes, some photos, connect with some friends from high school. But there's a select few, and there's a select group of people who use it for and as a communications tool, and that's just fine. But you have to portray the image that aligns with your position. If you're out there bashing the Realtor Association and you happen to be the president-elect of your local association, that's not going to really go that well for you. Because, to the second point, if I can find something on your social media profiles in 5 minutes or less, a client, a fellow realtor, a reporter, or just a member of the public can too. We all are entitled to our opinions, our perspectives, and our experiences. But sometimes the platforms that are used through social media are not utilized in a way that aligns with their position, their role, and their responsibility. And that's important to always take into account, because you don't want to make yourself a part of the story unless you're intended to be. It's not beneficial if, because of a social media post, a news story pops up on the local news that says local realtor thinks that the sky is green. I was just walking in the grocery store, and on the little cart advertisement, I saw that realtor's picture there. I'm not going to trust them to sell my house. They think the sky is green, but I'm looking outside and the sky is blue. That's problematic. It's having that perspective and having that understanding of the role and the responsibility that any business professional, I wouldn't say this only to realtors, I say this to any business professional. If you're out there and you're not necessarily talking about your business and why it's important, and you're out there talking about why in my case, UNC is not a great basketball team, or I can't stand Duke. You're kind of dividing out where the role and responsibility is, especially in my role. If I started talking about partisan politics, we represent the Realtor Party. The Realtor Party is purple. It's not red or blue. I can certainly have my own personal partisan political feelings, and when I go in the voting booth, can cast a vote for whoever I choose. But in my professional and in my personal role, having a divided and a divisive personal political view isn't helpful to the conversation. All I've really done is made myself a part of the story, because I'm gonna have 50 people who sign on and reply to that comment that they agree with me, and 50 or maybe even more than that who disagree with me. And even though there were people who agreed with me, it doesn't necessarily make it effective, and it doesn't necessarily align with the core vision of being effective and successful in my communications to anybody. So as we close, let's recap the 5 keys to effective communication. By knowing who you are and what your role is, by understanding what you already have with you to support you, by making things as simple and as clear as possible, by knowing that you're not alone in your communication, and by protecting your brand, you can be effective and successful in any communications engagement that you have. I certainly and completely have confidence in you. I would not say that lightly, but knowing realtors, knowing who you are, I know that you can be successful. I appreciate the time that I've been provided today. I will gladly answer any questions that have come through the chat, and I thank you very much for your time. Let's see.
And I'm looking over there, Seth. I don't see any questions yet. I see some thank yous. We'll give them just a minute, and if we don't have any more, we'll send you off to this beautiful day and hopefully to an early 4th of July weekend tomorrow. We have a question about the importance of saying less rather than more, it looks like.
That is always a balance that you have to find. We can use the line from Hamilton, where Aaron Burr tells Alexander Hamilton to talk less and smile more. In some cases, that is the key. As a communicator myself, I certainly fall into the pits of talking a lot, because that's how I think that communications is supposed to occur. But I think it comes down to a balance. You don't want necessarily in an effective communication want to have a lot of dead space, because then you're kind of wasting both of your times. But if you're both talking over each other and not allowing the other person to be heard, it ultimately isn't effective. And I use one caveat there. Zoom is a really hard platform, especially in a multi-way conversation, to make sure that you're not talking over somebody. I do like the hand raise feature, either the little button on the bottom or the physical actual hand raise to break through that sometimes.
It's a great answer. No more questions came up, so I'm actually just going to echo Monique's statement. She said this was a great presentation, and she's grateful for the information on communicating effectively. So thank you so much for joining us today, Seth.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks.